Oh, welcome back to the kitchen. This lesson, well, it's a doozy because it's on every packaged food that you eat. Nutrition labels. They are super important, and I'll tell you why. Because they give us a lot of perspective on the things that we're putting into our body. Because at the end of the day, food is fuel for the body. So on our nutrition label, we've got some really interesting pieces and components. If you already know how to read a nutrition label, you're probably ahead of the curve, and that's great. But if you don't, now's a great time to learn, and I'll tell you why. Because all the information on a nutrition facts label gives you a lot of perspective on how healthy a food is, how it nourishes our body, or how it interacts with our body's systems. So, one of the first things we want to discuss is serving sizes and calories. Our nutrition facts label will give us a pretty clear idea of what an amount of a serving is. So, for an example here, we use 1 cup of cereal. And this may not be exactly for a cereal, but 1 cup would be the serving size. And in that 1 cup, there would be 230 calories. Now, calories are the amount of fuel within the food. So the higher the calorie count, oftentimes the higher amount of fuel. But that means our body has to work harder to burn that fuel. Second are our nutrients. So our nutrients, there's things to avoid. Things like fats and saturated fats. We can still have them, but in much lower amounts. And things like sugars and added sugars, which are not so good for our body. But our nutrients give us a lot of perspective too on things that are great for our bodies. Things like our proteins, things like fiber, which comes in soluble and insoluble fiber forms, and then other additions to our food that may naturally exist or be added to fortify our foods, such as vitamins and minerals, things that are good for our body and help give us nourishment. Now, there are things to be aware of as well, because in our nutrition labels, there are footnotes and ingredients. And the footnotes will often base the calorie count and serving sizes based on the amount of calories you're taking in each day, whether it's for a 2,000 calorie diet or a 2,500 calorie diet. Now, there's some tips that we want to discuss with you too, because it's very, very, very important. With that, we have to look at the daily value percentages of different things that we're taking in. So if we're eating a high fat or high sugar food, the daily value percentage of the fat or sugar in that food is going to be a lot higher. So we're going to have to cut out some of that to balance our diet throughout the day. Also on these labels, oftentimes, are allergens listed with the ingredients. Oftentimes on a product label, it will say contains milk, contains peanuts, contains soy. So it will allow you to see certain allergens that might be in your food. And some people can have very bad reactions to different allergens in their foods. It's also false advertising. On a lot of labels, people can get away with saying something's really healthy, but it's not so healthy. It's not fair, but it still happens. So we have to be aware of advertising when it comes to our food as well. And lastly, our ingredient label is often going to share with us any added flavors that may come from unnatural sources, any added colors or dyes added to our food to create different shades of coloration and things that we eat, and lastly, added sugars, because a lot of foods may have naturally occurring sugars, like fruits. Fruits have a lot of naturally occurring sugars, but when we add extra sugar to make the fruits even sweeter in certain packaged products, we have to disclose the added sugars. So these are just a few of the things that we wanted to cover with you today on how to read a nutrition label.